Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexandra, and I'm your webinar hostess. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Mark Towler, Senior Product Expert here at Progress, will be presenting to you best practices on device discovery. Mark, take it away.
Hello, thank you, Alex, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As Alex mentioned, my name is Mark Towler. I'm a senior product expert here at Progress, and what I'm going to do today is go through a brief, but hopefully fairly comprehensive overview of device discovery as part of our best practice series. We're going to be looking at what it is and what you need to do to really fulfill best practices for device discovery. So with a little luck, this is it's a fairly fundamental principle when it comes to network monitoring and management, but there are some nuances that I think we need to take a look at, and it never hurts to revisit the fundamentals. So with that said, what is it and why should you care? Simply put, device discovery is a process that will find and identify, and that's important, everything that's currently connected to your network. Seems basic, but it is obviously something you absolutely have to have. What is on your network? How do you figure out what's connected? Device discovery will tell you. It gives you a number of benefits. The obvious ones are both in terms of monitoring and in troubleshooting network problems. You cannot monitor it if you cannot see it and you don't know if it's there. This is a basic business principle. You can't manage what you can't see. It's absolutely essential to have a handle on what's out there if you're going to try and monitor it or manage it. It also really helps if you want a map of what's going on in your network. And sometimes this is done automatically for you. Sometimes you build it manually, but a network map, a topology map that shows all your individual systems and devices and how they interconnect and the live status of that is absolutely one of the most powerful tools you can have when keeping your network healthy and dealing with network issues. It's a key part of not only understanding what's going on in your network, but understanding how to fix it. And one thing I want to kind of stress as we're talking about all of this, bits and pieces of discovery can be done by individual solutions that come with the hardware. If you buy a Cisco switch, you'll have the software that will help you manage that switch and tell you what that switch is and where it is and maybe what it's connected to. The whole point of discovery at this scale is to be completely vendor agnostic. The idea here is to have a view in context of every single device that's connected to your network, no matter who makes it or no matter what kind of system it's running. So again, table stakes there. Another advantage, of course, of discovery is asset inventory. And I'll give you an example in a minute of why this is so valuable to one of our customers. But this will let you produce almost instantly a complete list of every single asset that is in your network. And just that can change. So it's something worth bearing in mind. Similarly, both audits and compliance trigger into this. Depending on your organization, you may very well have specific regulations with which you need to comply. They can be externally imposed, things like HIPAA or GDPR or the upcoming California CCPA, but you may have to comply with them at threat of fines or worse, or these can be internal processes or regulations or requirements or simply standards that you need to comply with. And you want to be able to not only audit your network devices and systems to make sure that they are in compliance, but you also want to be able to prove to any auditors that you're in compliance. Just because you know it's true doesn't mean you can prove it to someone else. And again, that's where the legal people get involved and fines start racking up. So a big part of this as well is reporting. You need to be able to instantly at any time create a full report of what's in your network and how it's configured and whether or not it's in compliance rather. So that's great. We need to do network discovery. What are we looking for when we do discovery? Well, obviously everyone's thinking, the standard stuff, the servers, the routers, the switches. Don't forget the storage devices. You've got a lot of different types of storage devices and things like printers and various other physical devices that are out there. All of them are connected to your network in some way, and all of them need to be accounted for. All of them can cause problems, and you need to see all of them. Another piece that people also need to be very much aware of are the wireless access points in your overall wireless infrastructure. Some of those are physical. You've actually got a wireless router or an access point hanging off the ceiling. Some of them are still physical but virtually managed. So things like Meraki is a perfect example where the management of that is all virtual. You just hang them and then go to their website to manage them. There's been such an explosion in wireless over the last 10 years. We're at the point where plugging something physically in for an end user is almost unheard of these days. They expect to sit down with their laptop, open it up, and just start working. So all of this is part of the network magic that the IT team is responsible for, and they've got to be able to have a handle on this, so they've got to be able to see it in context along with all those physical devices. And continuing with the whole virtual theme, of course, virtual devices are the next piece. Everyone's familiar with the concept of breaking those servers up into VMs and virtual machines so that you can split loads around and shuffle things about. That's great, except if your physical device has 10, 20, 50 virtual machines on it, you need to have a way of figuring that out as well as part of your network inventory. It doesn't help to just point at one big box and say, yeah, it all happens in there. You need a bit more granularity than that. So your discovery system needs to be able to look into your virtual devices and provide a full list, and again, hopefully a whole topology map of where every guest and every host is. Cloud resources are another example. You can't just point at someone else's computer that's owned somewhere else up in the cloud and say it all happens there. There are, again, specific cloud servers, cloud machines, load balancers, a lot of quote unquote devices that exist up in the cloud. And again, that's a little trickier. You can't just send an IP ping to figure out what's going on with that. That's where your discovery tool is going to need to interface with the specific API of the cloud vendor, whether it's AWS or Azure or someone else. So that's a key part of it. That's pretty much kind of the topology, but you need to go a level deeper, especially when we talked about some of those compliance issues. You need to be able to look at the software levels, and that's kind of twofold. One, you want to look at the applications that are running across your network devices, but more importantly, you need to look at the software each one of those devices themselves is running. That's the OS, the software, the firmware, the configuration of that software and firmware on each system, server, device, router, you name it. That's a big part of what you need to know when it comes to network discovery and when it comes to being consistent. And then finally, and this isn't absolute must-have, but it's a really good best practice, you do want your discovery solution to find traffic flows or traffic flow points, areas where you can analyze network traffic, because that's something you're going to want to do later. Not always, but if you do want to be able to do it, you want to be able to say, okay, this is one of the main switches, everything passes through here. If I analyze traffic starting here, I'll be able to get the entire network. All of this is the sort of information that your discovery solution is going to find. So how do you find all these items? Well, with a discovery tool. And I'm sorry, I know that sounds contemptuous, but this isn't something you're doing manually, except, as a matter of fact, we do have one customer who was doing it manually. So, this is something that you do need to have. And there's a variety of these out there. They can range from very, very basic and free to highly sophisticated and, not that expensive. Discovery tools are, as I said, kind of table stakes. You have to have a good network discovery before you can monitor, manage, or go forward. So it's a fairly well understood technology these days, but it does come in various different levels of capability at various different price points. As we say, you can probably go out and find a very inexpensive Hyundai for about $15,000, but if you want a Cadillac or a Mercedes, you need to be putting down, considerably more. And each one of them will do the absolute basics, but there's a big difference between the two. Generally, your network discovery tool is going to go and search using SNMP, WMI, and ping. Those are kind of the basics. Almost everything can be talked to using one of those technologies or protocols. And it will use something called layer link discovery protocol. And what that means is that it's going to be searching on layer 2 and layer 3 for the actual physical links and the various protocols that make up those connections. That's how it determines how all of the pieces of your network are connected, and that's how it's going to build a layer 2 or 3 topology map. And and I've actually got an example there on the right. This is as part of the discovery process. The tool, in this case WhatsApp Gold, has gone out and found individual devices and determined how they're connected. If I zoomed right in fact I should have before taking the picture, you could see the actual bandwidth levels, the actual physical protocols and connections that are in there, whether it's 100 megabit Ethernet, GigE, OC 142, whatever. Now, a big caveat here before you start all of this, you do have to have credentials to everything you're investigating. And let me back off in just a second. You don't have to have a credential. You can ping something and it'll respond and say, I'm a Cisco switch. And that's all you're ever going to know about it. You're not going to know any more details, when it was purchased, any of the other information, how many ports, all that other stuff. All you're going to know is that it exists. You need a little bit more information in order to properly manage them, let alone monitor them. And it's not going to let you in because security, of course. So you have to have credentials to everything you want to discover. And that's the number one step. You put those into your device discovery solution, and it will use those credentials to go and get the information you need. Now, going into a little bit more detail beyond this, exactly how it's working, it's a straightforward process for the most part. It's going to go out and scan every IP address out there that it can find. You can also restrict it usually to a select range. That can be good if you don't want to, rediscover your entire network, just new items or certain areas. Usually, the discovery tool will leverage router bridge tables. So these are the tables each router has inside that tells it, what it's connected to. So it will do a SNMP smart scan, a simple network management protocol smart scan, where it reaches out, says, hey, give me your bridge tables, and then uses that bridge table to reach out to every other router it's connected to and ask the same question, rinse and repeat until it's found everything that has a connection to anything on your network at the time. There may be other protocols or discovery technologies rather that are used, ARP, SSH, ICMP. There's a virtual infrastructure management protocol that may come into use. It's going to depend on your network and on the devices, but generally one or some combination of all of these will be the tools that are used to reach out and see what is going on in your network and what's connected to everything. And again, I want to stress this isn't just, what's connected and what are you. You need to get as much detail as possible, not just the IP address. Anyone can ping it and determine if there's an IP address. You want to know what its configuration is, what software version it is, who makes it, what the vendor is, what the MAC address is, what role, and I'll get into roles in just a minute, what role it performs in your network. There's a plethora of information that you can get, and the more you get, the more effectively you're going to be able to monitor and manage that device. So, okay, we've run a discovery scan. Great. Now what? Well, let's go a step beyond the basics, and here's where we get a bit more into some of the best practices that we were mentioning earlier. Automation is absolutely key. You run a network scan, network device discovery scan manually, great. That's a snapshot. You've done it once. Things are always changing in your network. It's constantly evolving. It's growing. It's changing. Things are dropping in. Things are dropping out. You want to run something automatically, not just manually. Have the robot do it. Schedule a daily, a weekly, a monthly discover. There are always users plugging in rogue devices. They decide they want another printer at their desk. They decide that they aren't getting a good enough Wi-Fi signal, and they plug in a Wi-Fi extender. There's a million different things that they will do because they're users. You deal with them all the time. This is shadow IT, it's called, all the time. If it's something simpler to do than to call you and get on your and to open up a ticket, they're going to do it if it's less hassle. And of course, there's all sorts of issues with that. Not only do you not know what's going on and you can't support it, but there's often major security issues involved with this. You need to answer the question, what's on my network? And this is the sort of thing that keeps, IT teams up at night. What is connected? Because there's always the possibility that something's there that shouldn't be there. And regular discovery can tell you what is connected at every time, and you can run it daily. We don't necessarily recommend every hour. I mean, you can. Discoveries aren't particularly network intensive. They are pinging every device on the network. It's not a huge bandwidth load, but it is some. Generally, once a night or every few nights, even weekly is probably fine, depending on your network. But you do need to take multiple snapshots because that's how you're going to get an idea of what's changing, and that's how you're going to find what isn't supposed to be there. And I kind of mentioned the security aspect of it before. This is not a security tool. Network discovery isn't going to prevent intrusions, but what it is going to do is help you maintain your security posture. You want to enhance your security posture whenever you can. And that's a term for all the different activities you're doing to keep your network secure. Security is really hot right now, and that's kind of a dumb thing to say. It's always a key issue, but sometimes it's more visible and aware, and people are more concerned about it than other times. There have been a lot of high-profile hacks. There have been a lot of massive data breaches, and it's almost constant that there are new patches being delivered, or oh, you got to change your passwords, or oh, update this software because they just found another exploit. This is constant. And the big advantage of an automatic discovery is that it will not only tell you things like what new has been plugged into your system, what's there that wasn't there before. It'll also let you know if there are things like configuration changes. If someone monkeyed with that router and changed the configuration so that they could access it through ports that maybe you wanted blocked off, or that your company wanted blocked off, or that a regulation required to be blocked off. This is the sort of thing that can help you maintain a more secure network. It's not going to necessarily automatically fix it, but it will help you keep things more secure overall. Now, I mentioned I'd talk about device roles, and this is kind of one of the other things I wanted to mention. Just like you've got a particular role, you're the IT guy, you keep the network running, you answer the help desk, whatever. There's other people in your organization that have specific roles. You, for example, are probably not handling accounts payable. You're probably not ordering the printer paper that goes into the printers. You might be. You might be the person who puts it into the machine, but regardless, someone else is paying for it. Someone else is doing the marketing. Someone else might be involved in sales. There's some other engineer who's building the product. All of these are specific, discrete roles that all work together. And just like humans, a lot of network devices are generalists and could fulfill multiple different roles. You can assign a device role. It's kind of a template defining how your network uses a device. So that router could do a bunch of different things, but maybe for a variety of reasons, you want it to act in this particular way. You want it to have this particular threshold for bandwidth alerts. You want it to have this particular number of ports open and available. You want it only to route to these particular areas. It's all going to vary, and you can even have multiple different routers that are doing multiple different jobs and have multiple different roles, or shared roles. They're all routers, but maybe some are the executive routers and some are the routers in the lunchroom that don't necessarily have the same requirements. All of these can be roles that you assign to items in your network, and these roles will allow you to specifically provide automatic configuration settings. This is really huge. It's a big advantage in terms of compliance, in terms of security, in terms of ease of management, and it allows for easy filtering and identification of devices. The big advantage is this is the sort of thing that you can do as part of the discovery process. If you go out and discover routers and you encounter 3 of the same router that you've already got, you can automatically assign those specific roles. So the benefits of assigning device roles, a big one right off the head is really ease of use and administration. It's a lot easier to look at routers that might be from a dozen different vendors, but the role that they play is what's important. And whether it's an HP router or a Cisco router or whatever, you can go, all right, these routers all have to act in this particular way. Same thing for servers. I'm just using routers as an example. It allows you to automatically apply monitors in certain ways. So you can configure the specific monitors, the parts you want to monitor, the fan, the number of ports. Maybe we don't care about port number 5 because no one ever uses port number 5 or whatever. You can apply all of this, or maybe port number 6 is the CEO's printer. You want to make sure that one's always up. Things like that are things that you can automatically apply across every single device in that role, and similar for monitors. You want device roles because it allows you to be consistent, especially when it comes to not only configurations, but in terms of notifications. Let's go back to our example of the routers for the executive crew and the routers in the lunchroom. If those are wireless access points, for example, you probably want to know when the executive team's wireless access point is hitting 80% capacity, because that indicates, either you need to extend capacity, add more capacity, or someone, is doing something they shouldn't. On the other hand, if in the lunchroom capacity hits 95%, probably not that big a deal. So again, this is a situation where you can apply notification policies based on device roles and device types. And of course, if you're going to assign change management tasks, it's a lot easier to go, all right, instead of hunting down every single specific router for this particular thing, I can say, hey, all routers need to now shut off port 8080, something like that. It's just a convenient way of labeling and managing a large number of devices. And the reason this kicks into discovery is it's something you can apply as part of discovery. So again, beyond the basics, best practices are think of your device rules, think of what kind of rules you want to apply, and then when you do a discovery, you will save yourself a lot of work. And then I mentioned asset inventory. I'm going to touch on it again for a second. And we've kind of got an example of, doing a report, or at least a filter of assets that you could report on. Getting the information out of your network is really key. You need to know it, but at the same time, you often have to let other people know this. Not only people within the IT infrastructure, or IT hierarchy rather, but you'd be surprised how often you're going to want to take this to executives, especially to the accounting and the finance people, even legal in a number of cases. With an asset inventory, what you can do is with one click, you can show every single asset, every single device, every single thing that's connected to your network, or a subset of that, and you can do that automatically. I've known organizations where the IT team simply automatically dumps a report of what's connected once a week into a centralized folder online where everyone can see it. So the IT guys and the finance and anyone else can get a look at it. Similarly, you could use this for a variety of ways to comply with regulations. If you need to show, hey, we've patched every single router, every single server, every single device with the latest patches, here we can run a report on what hasn't been patched. We can run a report on what's been patched in the last 6 months. We can run a report on things that are still waiting patches. Or this morning Cisco announced found a bug and you need to apply a patch to the series of routers. We can run a report and show exactly which ones we've got, where they are, how fast we need to patch them. The other piece that's important here is that this also applies to a number of different auditing and network management solutions. So for example, the amount of information you've been able to get with device discovery allows you to slice and dice your asset inventory in a variety of different ways. So things like device assets, you can look at the manufacturer, the model, the serial number, the hardware, the software or firmware versions it's running, even things like the chassis size or the chassis type. That can actually be surprisingly important. You've bought 5 of these routers last year, they changed the box slightly. Is that going to interfere with how you stack them or how you're planning on wiring them? Things like power supplies, fans, all of this information. Configurations I've touched on before, but same thing. The interfaces, the bridge ports, the switch ports, the VLANs, how are things set up? Software inventory, same thing. Systems inventory rather. Every single different system component detail, the CPU, the type of RAM, the amount of RAM, the type of disks, the OS version, what's the latest patch? I just mentioned that. Are there any additional installed software packages that you may have done? Does it support automatic update of warranty information? I know some Dell and HP routers will automatically go patch themselves. You want to know if they've done that. All of this is the sort of information you need to know. And maybe they couldn't get to that website and they couldn't patch, and you need to know whether or not that router did or didn't update. All of this is essential when someone comes by and says, hey, what equipment and systems and software do we have? Because at some point you're paying for all of this. And I mentioned, I was going to tell you a story. We've got a customer, they're a major university, and they didn't have an effective asset inventory tool. They had 5 campuses spread across the state, and they were literally sending people out to, get on ladders and poking around the back of wiring closets and write down the serial numbers of every device they could find. They had to do this biannually, so twice a year. It took them weeks. And they installed WhatsUp Gold, and it wasn't even the main reason they installed it, but they found with one click, bang, they just saved themselves hundreds of man hours. This is where they get the term delighter for how customers are happy with your product. But that's a perfect example of exactly how this can make your life a lot easier. So with all of that said, I'm going to wrap up in just a second. Those are kind of the main high points, and we can definitely take some questions. But I just want to plug the one product I've been kind of highlighting all the way through this presentation. Once you've discovered your network, That's the first step. The next thing you need to do is monitor it and manage it. And WhatsUp Gold is a truly excellent network monitoring solution. It's very easy to use. It's very easy to deploy. Its value is that it allows you to find and fix problems fast, usually before they impact your end users. And anyone who's worked in IT knows that the worst possible thing to have happen is some user calling up going, why has the network been down for 2 hours and why haven't you done anything about it, when you had no clue? If you can fix, and this is a quote from a customer, when you can fix something before a user notices, that's the holy grail of IT. And unfortunately, it's what makes the IT administrators the unsung heroes, because if everything's working, then what are they doing and why are we paying for them? And if things aren't working, well, they're not fixing stuff, why are we paying them? So believe me, we feel your pain. Our job is to try and make things as easy for you as possible. WhatsUp Gold will alert you through text, email, Slack. We've even got the ability to alert through Teams. That's in the works. It's very inexpensive to set up and license. The licensing is device-based rather than sensor-based. So we don't care if it's a 4-port router or a 128-port switch. It's one device. We only charge you for one device. We don't nickel and dime over which ports you want to monitor and which monitors you want to assign. It's got some very powerful configuration management and inventory and compliance auditing capabilities, as I've kind of outlined. It does cloud monitoring, network traffic analysis. It'll monitor your applications, your virtual machines. It does it all. And for this particular case, I will cheerfully point you at the free trial. If you go to whatsupgold.com, on every page there's a big red button that says free trial. It gives you a 14-day free trial of our full Cadillac, fully loaded Total Plus edition of WhatsUp Gold, all the bells and whistles. Only works for 14 days, but you can have it do a discovery of your network immediately and report that right for you. So you've got a free discovery tool. You're only going to be able to use the monitoring piece for 14 days, but I advise you to try it out, because it not only gives you an idea of what's going on in your network, and you can use it as a snapshot for free, go right ahead, but it also gives you an idea of how simple it is to figure out what's going on out there. Thank you very much.